Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana Ortiz, and I am the Outreach Coordinator for Business Development at Entrada Group. Thank you very much for making the space in your agendas this afternoon to joining us for our second Wire Harness webinar, Mexico, Your Cost Competitive Labor Solution. This webinar is brought to you by Wire and Cable Technology International Magazine, as well as Entrada Group. Your host this afternoon will be John Paul McDarris, Director of Business Development at Entrada Group, and Mike McNulty, Vice President and Editor of Wire and Cable Technology International Magazine. John Paul McDarris currently sits in Albuquerque, New Mexico, working with Entrada Group for 9 years and working for 11 years with manufacturers in their startup phases. He is an architect by trade and has a master's from the University of Austin. Mike McNulty is the Vice President and Editor of Wire and Cable Technology International and has worked as a manufacturing engineer at an automotive wire and cable manufacturing company. He is now a member of the IWCS Symposium Committee and Wire Association International, as well as the Executive Director of the Wire and Cable Industry Suppliers Association. As I mentioned, this is our second year, our second time co-hosting this webinar to international manufacturers and wire harness manufacturers. And as we were creating this presentation, we wanted to focus this on the challenges that are currently happening globally and in Mexico. Today, here to talk to you about wire harness and the top products and economic overview will be Mike McNulty, as John Paul McDarris will talk to you about the challenges for US-based manufacturers and challenges and advantages of Mexico. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Mike to this presentation and also give you a big thanks for once again co-hosting this event with us. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you, John Paul. It's good to be here, and thanks everybody for attending this webinar. My name is Mike McNulty. I'm from Wire and Cable Technology International Magazine. This is the second year we've had the privilege of joining the Entrada Group in this webinar, so we're grateful for that, and we're grateful for everybody who's signed on today to check it out. Wire and Cable Technology International Magazine is now in its 50th year of publication, and we cover the technology for making, processing, and using all types of wires, cables, wire harnesses, and cable assemblies. The magazine comes out 6 times per year, and every issue has a section called the Wire Harness Cable Connector section, which covers specifically products and materials and machinery and technology and business for wire and cable processing, distribution, and use. So making wire harnesses and cable assemblies. We're a media partner with the Wire Harness Manufacturers Association, and we're a longtime sponsor of the seminar room at the Electrical Wire Processing Technology Expo held in Milwaukee every year, except for the last 2 years because of the pandemic. We're also the official magazine of the IWCS Cable and Connectivity Symposium. And in the magazine, we publish editorial free of charge, ranging from press releases to standalone byline technical articles, trade show coverage, business news, etc. And all that is published free of charge. We also offer subscriptions to people in the industry free of charge in a print or digital or both formats. And we currently have subscribers in over 100 different countries. And the number of print and digital altogether is over 15,000. So we have a lot of readers, a lot of sectors all over the world. We also provide promotional opportunities in the magazine for, you can buy space ads, you can also buy digital only products like email blasts and website advertisements. So lots of things, and it's all focused on the wire, cable, wire harness, and cable assembly sectors of the industry. Okay, we also have some additional publications. We put out a monthly business and market newsletter called The Overview, and it's 8 pages of condensed news stories about what's going on in the business market of wire and cable industry. We also have an annual buyer's guide, and we publish a couple directories, one for the IWCS supplier exhibition that takes place every year in the fall. This year it's in Providence, Rhode Island. And then we manage a nonprofit trade association of North American-based suppliers of machinery, materials, and accessories for making wire and cable, and we publish their annual directory. We're going to present briefly some supply and labor trends in the wire harness industry. Also, as well as we're going to look at some economic and technology trends. We're going to do a brief summary of some of the top products of 2021 as featured in our annual article at the beginning of the year, where we present the products that were featured in the magazine editorially in the last year that we deemed to be the top ones. And then we'll summarize the presentation. So moving along, the we've identified the supply and labor trends as well as some political trends that are impacting us. And I think everybody's pretty familiar with these over the last over 2021 and 2022, and even going back into 2020. That maybe one thing we've learned over the last 2 years, and with the pandemic and everything that's gone along with it, is to expect the unexpected. We've had lots of problems with transportation, which seem to be easing a bit, but we're still seeing some price surges and shortages in raw materials and components throughout the world, and in metals and plastics and components and things like that. Increased lead times that we have not seen in a really long time. Lots of things going out over a year. And then the big one is the labor shortages that we've seen, particularly in the manufacturing and transportation sectors. People having a hard time finding labor to fill their bulging order books and that. So it's really, we cover 3 different industrial industries and throughout our different magazines, and it's across the board, people having a hard time filling manufacturing jobs and transportation jobs. And we've seen recent news that Walmart is paying truckers in the $90,000 to $110,000 a year salary for being a truck driver. So lots of problems there. Also, we've seen weakened currencies, not only here in the United States, but around the world, due to the massive amounts of stimulus spending poured into the economy over the last 2 years because of the pandemic. And that doesn't seem to be slowing down. And we're seeing the effects of that with increased prices in that. We've also had some tariff issues and other tariff issues all across the world affecting the supply trends. And now we're seeing energy price surges, not just from inflation, but also from the war impact in Eastern Europe. So really seeing that spike. And I was making some business travel plans, and I'm kind of still in sticker shock for the prices for flights. So it's definitely a problem on the energy and inflation, and I don't see that abating anytime soon, especially with all the spending they've done. And then finally, we have the war impact. And then the thing I don't have up here as a point, but now we have in China, where they have the zero COVID policy that they seem attached to. And that's starting to affect some of the supply chain as well, because they're shutting down factories. Okay. Wire harness economic trends continue on to the sectors that wire harnesses go into. The most common ones are the automotive and aerospace, but also going into robotics, appliances, construction equipment, trucks, buses, medical devices, computers, railroad, etc. And these sectors pretty much follow as GDP growth goes in a region or a country. Those sectors follow along, and they're all going pretty strong right now. But as GDP goes, those sectors usually go too, except when there's technology disruptors, like, for example, light vehicles and trucks and buses switching over to electrical power generation versus internal combustion engine. And we'll talk about that in a few slides. In general, the GDP globally, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, is projecting 4.4% global GDP growth this year, moderating down to 3.8% next year. The World Trade Organization is saying merchandise trade is continuing to grow throughout the world after dropping dramatically at the beginning of the pandemic. On the automotive side here in the United States, there's reports coming out from the IHS Markit saying that they're expected automotive growth this year to be just under 3%, and then jumping up to 8% or higher in 2023 as the supply chain smooths out, and then dropping down to a respectable 4.7% in 2024. That translates into expected units of vehicle sales in the United States of 15.5, 16.8, and 17.6 million units over the next 3 years. So pretty good trajectory for the automotive industry in the United States. Aircraft wire growth is forecasted by Research and Markets to be close to 6% annually through 2026. So also some strong numbers there. Okay, here's a look into the details of the IMF economic GDP growth rate. You see in orange there the world rates, and then the advanced economies on the left in blue, slightly lower at 3.9 this year and 2.6 next year. And then developing economies and emerging markets at a higher level, 4.8 and 4.7, almost identical over the next 2 years. So a little bit higher growth rates expected in those areas of the world. Closer to home here in the United States, here's some data put out by Statista, where they said that the economy grew about 6% last year, and that this year expected around 5%, and then moderating down in 2023 through 2026 to just over 2 and under 2%. So really kind of flattening out over the next 4 years after this year is the forecast for the United States. GDP. Still positive growth, but tempering quite a bit. Here's a couple images from the World Trade Organization on trade. saw the big spike down in 2020 with the pandemic, and then coming back when we had some optimistic projections and pessimistic projections, but all being in a positive area. And then by region, you see some double-digit growth rates in 2021. And so that's also growth expected this year as well. So merchandise trade is going well globally. Here's a table with lots of data from the IHS market forecast. And you can see down at the bottom, the total number of light vehicle sales in the world were about 80 million in 2021, going up to hitting 100 million, forecasted to hit 100 million in 2028 and go a little bit higher in 2029. That comes out to about 28% growth over this decade of the 2020s in light vehicle sales globally. In the developed areas in North America, Japan, and Western Europe, we're seeing a peak in automotive sales around 2024-25 forecasted by IHS market, then tapering off, but still at a good level in a double-digit 15 to 17% growth over this decade. The developing areas like in China, the ASEAN region, Eastern Europe, and India are much higher forecasted numbers in the 30 to 50% growth range over this decade. So lots of bullish numbers on light vehicle sales by region. On the less optimistic side, here's a chart that I showed last year as well, and this was produced before the pandemic, so maybe it needs to be adjusted by that depression moving over to the left maybe. But this is a chart put out by ITR Economics, and they have a really good track record on forecasting industrial production and economic trends. And they've been forecasting a really good roaring 20s for the 2020s with 3 small recessions built in, which is normal for economics, and then a depression coming in the 2030s decade, primarily in the United States from demographic changes and from legacy spending in retirement and in healthcare, and for interest payments on debt accumulation. So I'd imagine this picture is a little bit worse now with all the money that was spent over the last 2 years or printed to be spent. So maybe that even moves a little bit further, comes a little bit quicker than expected. But anyways, should be pretty good for most of this decade, and then there will be a big hit, but that's the way things go. It's good to be prepared for these things. Okay, here's a chart it's a little bit dated. We showed this last year and we tried to get it updated by the CRU group. It's the market share of automotive harness exports by country. And in 2018, it showed that Mexico was leading the way, followed by Romania, China, Morocco, Philippines, Germany, Ukraine, Serbia, and the Czech Republic. And CRU group was not able to put some resources on this to update it, but they did provide us with some electrical vehicle updated information, which we'll share in a few moments here. But I would expect with what has happened over the last 4 years or the last 2 years in particular, that maybe this is even market shares, maybe even higher for Mexico and lower for China. But anyways, this shows here the main countries that are involved in wire harness exports. And so we're gonna jump into the electrical vehicle forecast, which is all the rage these days. And these are some nice charts put together by the CRU group. We see the one on the left showing in dark blue internal combustion engine sales, and then in the regular blue hybrid electric vehicles, and then the gold the plug-in electric vehicles, and the light blue is battery electric vehicles. So as we see internal combustion declining over the next 20 years and all the electric vehicles going up to the point where they're probably hitting the majority by sometime in the mid 2030s. And the thing that's interesting is, we have on the right the kilograms of conductors per car unit, and we see that what they are for the internal combustion engine on the left, and then for the different type of electric vehicles, and we see that the battery one is the one that has the most cable in it, with a big share of low voltage, high voltage, and winding wire in it. So I think this bodes well for cable producers and wire harness producers, that no matter which direction or mix that we have in vehicles and how they're produced and how they're sold and used, there's going to be a lot of wire and cable in them. Okay, so then these charts here, the one on the left shows the automotive cable demand in thousands of tons of conductors. 2020, it's mostly low voltage cables, and you see that growth has decent and then kind of flattens out over the next 15 to 20 years. And then we see high growth rates in the high voltage cable and the winding wire. And then we see the appearance of the charging cable wire in the gold at the top there as the switch goes into the electric vehicles. And there's three different types of charging cables. There's the slow charger, fast, and the rapid. And no surprise that the rapid one is forecasted to see the biggest growth over the years. So we have some other trends that we're seeing. We've talked about electrification, which is the big one, but then also the next one we want to talk about is connected and autonomous, where vehicles are going to be connected to infrastructure and collecting and exchanging information with the spaces that they're operating in, as well as with other vehicles. So this is definitely a trend. The cars are getting smarter. So you have wire harnesses that are not only communicating, not only transferring electricity and power, but they're transmitting information. So that's a big trend that's going to keep continuing as we go forward. Sustainability, okay, is also a big thing. We talk about making these vehicles lighter in weight, which means making the harnesses lighter in weight so that they can operate using less energy. So the fact we have more electricity being transferred in these vehicles, more information being transferred in these vehicles, it means more wire and cable in smaller spaces and with products that weigh less, alloys and different, thinner wall conductors and things like that. So that's definitely a trend. We're also seeing a rise in Ethernet cable use for the communicating of the information. And then NEMA put out a study that they're expecting there's a big opportunity for rail electrification in North America. Because worldwide, we got about 25% of all worldwide rail systems are electrified, mostly in Europe and Asia, and only about 1% of these are electrified in North America. So this is a trend that may change and will have an impact on wire and cable and wire harness producers in the United States. We're also seeing an increased use of power by flying and driving by wire, as opposed to traditional systems like pneumatic and hydraulic and mechanical systems for transferring of movement. So there's a trend there. Space exploration, wire harnesses used there. There's a picture in the top right showing some wire harnesses on a Mars rover being landed. And then finally, we have the general trends of Industry 4.0, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and remote operation of vehicles and machines that bodes well for increased use of wires, cables, and wire harnesses. We're going to jump over quickly, take a look at some of the top products. Every year in the beginning of our first issue, the January, February issue of the year, we take a look back at the products that were featured in the magazine editorially, and we picked the ones that we thought had the most impact and that were the best. And not surprising this year, on the wire harness side, we saw lots of products related to electrical vehicles. This first slide here shows on the left, we've got some HV shielded cable for electric vehicles in the orange there. And then on the right, we have a crimping machine designed specifically for high voltage cables. The next slide, the machine on the left there is a heavy gauge wire processing machine. And then we've got some battery terminal connectors on the right that was named the top product. Here on the left, we've got some orange conduits that are used in electrical vehicles, and we've got some charging inlets on the right that are used for charging electrical vehicles and electrical vehicle charging cables. So electrical vehicles were predominant in the top products of 2021. And then the last one I want to put up here on the left there is some cables with the copper prices on the rise. We've also seen copper cable thefts on the rise, and some manufacturers have developed ways of monitoring and tracking their products with it built into the cable so that deter theft. So that's what's shown on the left. And on the right, I've got the logo for the Electrical Wire Processing Technology Expo. That's a great place to see the latest technology and trends and to attend some seminars and workshops and keynote speeches to hear what's going on economically and technically in the wire processing sector of the industry. Last time I looked, there's a little bit over 160 exhibitors there, including Entrada Group will be there, as well as Wire and Cable Technology International. And we're sponsoring the seminar room. There's lots of great seminars, workshops, networking opportunities. You can check it out in the March-April issue of our magazine on page 126. We've got a nice preview article. You can check that out at wiretech.com. You can also go to the show website, which is the electricalwireshow.com. And if you go, I suggest you stop by the Entrada booth to visit with John Paul in booth 1017, and come to our booth, which is 537. I'll be there, as well as our newest employee. His name is Alex Lippincott. He's our new sales manager. You come by and say hello to Alex. So that's my take on the wire harness trends to watch. We've got lots of supply, labor, and political challenges facing us this year and for many years to come. Expect the unexpected. The good news is that the wire harness industry services many sectors with lots of opportunities, lots of new technology coming around. We've got lots of solid GDP growth ahead. And even though we have a depression maybe looming in the year 2030, there'll still be needs for wire harnesses, even in the depression, just different levels. And then some of the trends we're covering and we're seeing are electrification of vehicles, connectivity of them, lots of technical innovations in that area. And there's definitely creative solutions abound, which you can check out at the Electrical Wire Processing Technology Expo in Milwaukee next month, as well as in the pages of Wire and Cable Technology International Magazine. Thanks for your attention. And thanks again, JP and Deanna, for inviting me to be part of this.